My name is Sarah, and my life took a drastic turn not just once but twice. To explain, let me start at the beginning. I was born to John and Mary David, two wonderful parents, in a quiet suburban town. My father was a journalist and my mother worked as a nurse. We weren't wealthy, but we were content. Everything seemed normal until I turned 14, and then, in an instant, everything changed. It was a rainy Friday evening when my parents were on their way home from a dinner party. I was with my grandmother, Betty, at home, watching cartoons, when the phone rang. I'll never forget the cold rush of fear that swept over me when I heard my grandmother crying in the kitchen. The following days passed in a blur. We were told that my mother had died instantly in the crash, while my father had barely survived. When I finally saw him in the hospital, he was a mere shadow of the man I had known. His legs were crushed, and the doctors said he would never walk again. "Sarah," he whispered weakly, reaching out to take my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry." I couldn't understand why he was apologizing. It wasn't his fault. A drunk driver had caused the crash. But as I grew older, I began to understand. He was sorry for the life we had to live from that moment on, for the struggles we would face, for the mother I had lost, and for the father he felt he could no longer be. However, my father, John David, was far stronger than he gave himself credit for. Once he left the hospital and adjusted to life in a wheelchair, he threw himself into his work. He had always been a gifted writer, and now, as an editor at the city's major newspaper, he poured all his energy into his job. As I entered my teenage years, he made sure I had everything I needed, encouraging me to join clubs, make friends, and try to live as normal a life as possible. But in truth, I preferred spending time with him. We watched old movies together, debated over books, and he helped me with my homework. When it came time for college, Dad insisted that I go away. "You need to spread your wings, kiddo," he said. "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." I was reluctant, but I knew he was right, so I went to the State University of New York to study accounting. There, I met Emily, who became my best friend. Through her, I met Mike, her second cousin. He was funny, kind, and didn't bat an eye when I told him about my dad. The first time Mike met Dad, they immediately hit it off, bonding over their shared love of classic rock. Later, Mike told me, "Your dad is cool, and you're incredible for taking care of him all these years." I tried to brush it off, but inside, I felt a sense of pride. For the first time since the accident, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could have a normal life, filled with love, laughter, and even a family of my own one day. After graduation, life started to come together. I got a job at the local tax service, and Mike became a long-haul truck driver. We dated for 4 years before he proposed to me on a crisp autumn evening in the park where we had our first date. I was overjoyed, but there was one important thing I had to make clear. "Yes, Mike, but I can't leave my dad. He needs me." Mike smiled and said, "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll all live together. Your dad's apartment is big enough for the 3 of us, right?" Our wedding was small but beautiful. Dad insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away, and there wasn't a dry eye in sight. Standing there, holding Mike's hand, I felt like I was living a fairy tale. But every fairy tale has its villains, and mine came in the form of my mother-in-law, Karen, and my sister-in-law, Ashley. From the moment I met them, I could tell they didn't approve of me. "So your father is handicapped?" Karen asked during our first meeting, wrinkling her nose like she smelled something bad. "He's disabled," I corrected, trying to stay calm. "But he works as an editor." "How nice," she interrupted, clearly not interested. Then she turned to Mike and asked, "Are you sure about this? There are so many nice girls from good families." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment, but Mike immediately defended me. "Mom, Sarah is from a good family. Her dad's disability doesn't change that. I love her, and that's all that matters." That shut Karen up, but I could still see the disapproval in her eyes. Ashley, following her mother's lead, was just as cold towards me. After the wedding, true to his word, Mike moved in with Dad and me, and our life settled into a comfortable routine. I'd go to work at the tax office while Mike was on the road for days at a time. When he was home, we'd all have dinner together. But whenever Karen and Ashley visited, the atmosphere in our home changed. They acted like they owned the place, barely acknowledging Dad's presence. Once I overheard Karen whispering to Ashley, "It's a shame Mike could have done so much better. Now he's stuck with this girl and her crippled father. What if they have children? Can you imagine the genes?" I was furious, but I kept quiet for Mike's sake. I tried to keep the peace, but it was getting harder and harder. One evening, after a particularly tense visit from Karen and Ashley, I broke down in tears. Mike found me in our bedroom crying. Hey, he said, pulling me into his arms. "What's wrong?" "Your mom and sister," I sobbed. "They hate me. They think I'm not good enough for you because of Dad." Mike's face hardened. "That's ridiculous. You and your dad are my family now. If they can't accept that, it's their problem, not ours." His words comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles with Karen and Ashley. As the months went by, Mike's trucking business began to grow. He was always on the road, traveling across the country in his big rig. I missed him terribly when he was gone, but I focused on my work at the tax office and spent my evenings keeping Dad company. One crisp autumn evening, as I was helping Dad into bed, Mike called. His voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "Sarah, I've been thinking," he said. "How would you feel about buying a townhouse? It would be easier for your dad to move around in a wheelchair. He could spend more time outside, plus you could have a garden, something to keep you busy when I'm on the road." The more he talked, the more I liked the idea. I glanced at Dad, who was pretending not to be drop-what. "What do you think, Dad?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker. Dad's eyes lit up. "A garden would be nice," he admitted, "and it would be easier to get outside." That settled it. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into house hunting. We finally found the perfect place, a spacious townhouse with wide doorways, a roll-in shower for Dad, and a beautiful backyard. Taking out a mortgage was scary, but with Mike's income, mine, and the rent from Dad's old apartment, we managed to make it work. We moved in on a sunny Sunday in spring, and I'll never forget the look on Dad's face as he wheeled himself out onto our new patio. "This is perfect, sweetie," he said, his eyes misty. "Thank you." The next few months passed as we settled into our new home, making it feel like our own. I planted a small vegetable garden, and Dad would spend hours sitting outside, soaking up the sunshine and fresh air. Life was peaceful, almost perfect. Then, we decided to host a housewarming party. We invited friends, colleagues, and yes, even Karen and Ashley. The party was in full swing when they arrived, fashionably late as always. They entered, their eyes scanning the house with barely concealed envy. As we toured the home, I could see Karen's mind racing. When we reached the master bedroom, she turned to me with a sly grin. "You know, Sarah," she said, her voice low, "this would be perfect for Mike and me. Why don't you send your father to a nursing home? Then I could move in here." It felt as though I had been slapped across the face. "Excuse me?" I managed to choke out. "Don't act so surprised," Karen continued. "Your father isn't well. He's not really the man he used to be, is he? He doesn't need all this luxury. A nursing home would be more than enough for someone in his condition." Before I could respond, Karen marched out to the patio where Dad was talking to some guests. To my horror, she grabbed his wheelchair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "Karen!" I shouted, rushing after her. "What are you doing?" "If he won't go to a nursing home, he can stay outside," she sneered. "That's what you wanted, right? For him to be outdoors?" My heart raced with anger and disbelief. Thankfully, Mike heard the commotion and rushed over. His face turned crimson with fury when he saw what his mother was doing. "Mom!" he yelled. "What the hell are you doing? Let go of John's chair right now." Karen was taken aback by Mike's tone. "But honey, I don't want to hear it." Mike interrupted. You and Ashley need to leave. Now. After they left, Mike apologized repeatedly to both Dad and me. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never imagined she'd do something like this. I'm just so sorry. Dad reached out and gently patted Mike's hand. It's not your fault, son, he said calmly. Some people just don't understand. Life eventually returned to a new routine. Karen and Ashley kept their distance, which was fine by me. Mike focused on his work, taking longer routes to help pay for our new home. I divided my time between my job at the tax office, taking care of our home, and looking after Dad. 4 years quickly flew by. Our life became comfortable and predictable. Mike was on the road often, but when he was home, our little family was happy. Dad's health remained stable, and he seemed content, spending his days in the garden or working on his editing from home. Then came the call that shattered everything. I was at work when my phone rang. A man's unfamiliar voice greeted me. Mrs. Walker, this is Officer Dave from the Highway Patrol. My stomach dropped. Yes? I barely managed to ask. I'm sorry to inform you that your husband, Mike Walker, has been in a serious accident. The rest of the conversation felt like a blur. Words like head-on collision and didn't make it circled around me, but I couldn't make sense of them. It wasn't until I heard myself thanking the officer and hanging up that the reality sank in. Mike was gone. The next week passed in a fog of grief and disbelief. I went through the motions of planning the funeral, feeling as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. The day before the service, I found the strength to call Karen. I thought she deserved to hear about her son's death from me, rather than through a newspaper obituary. Hello? Karen's voice was sharp. Karen, it's Sarah, I said, my voice trembling. It's about Mike. He's gone. There was an accident. A long silence followed before Karen's voice came back filled with venom. This is your fault, she hissed. You made him work so hard driving that truck to pay for your fancy house. You killed my son. I was stunned, unable to form words. Karen, Save it, she snapped. I expect you to give him the best funeral money can buy, but don't expect a penny from us. You made your bed, now lie in it. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. How could she be so cruel? How could she blame me for this? The day of Mike's funeral was gray and rainy, mirroring my mood. The church was packed. Mike had been well liked in the community, and it seemed as though half the town had come to pay their respects. After the service, as people offered their condolences, I realized that Karen and Ashley were nowhere to be seen. They hadn't even bothered to attend their own son and brother's funeral. Dad reached out and squeezed my hand. It's their loss, sweetie, he said softly. We're family, and we'll get through this together. As we pulled into our driveway, something seemed off. The lights were on in the house, which was strange because I was sure I had turned everything off before we left. Did you leave any lights on, Dad? I asked, frowning. He shook his head. No, I don't think so. As we got closer, I noticed movement inside the house. My heart started pounding. Were we being robbed on the day of Mike's funeral? I quickly helped Dad out of the car and into his wheelchair, my mind racing. Should I call the police? But as we approached the front door, I heard familiar voices inside. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized them. I pushed open the door to find Karen and Ashley in our living room, surrounded by boxes and pieces of furniture. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my grief momentarily forgotten in the face of this outrageous intrusion. Karen turned to me, her face a mask of fake sympathy. Oh, Sarah dear, we're just helping you pack up. After all, you can't possibly afford to keep this place now that Mike is gone. I was speechless. Ashley added, her voice sickeningly sweet. Don't worry. You can go back to your father's apartment. It's cozy. I could feel the anger building inside me. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now. Karen had the nerve to look offended. This house belongs to us now. All of Mike's property does. We're his family after all. Like hell you are, I exploded. Where were you today at his funeral? Oh, that's right, you couldn't be bothered to show up. Karen waved her hand dismissively. We were busy making arrangements. Now be a good girl and start packing. We'll meet you out by tomorrow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These women hadn't shed a tear for Mike, hadn't even attended his funeral, and now they were trying to kick us out of our home. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. Karen and Ashley exchanged worried looks. They clearly hadn't expected me to fight back. Now, Sarah, Karen began, but I cut her off. No, you have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house before I call the cops. This is my home. Mike and I bought it together. You have no right to be here. Maybe it was the steel in my voice or the fire in my eyes, but Karen and Ashley finally realized they had gone too far. They gathered their things and left, but not before Karen turned to me with a sneer. This isn't over, Sarah. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The days after Mike's funeral were a blur of grief, anxiety, and paperwork. I threw myself into sorting out Mike's affairs, partly to keep busy and partly out of fear that Karen and Ashley would try to take what wasn't theirs. A week after the funeral, I received an unexpected call from a local law firm. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, fearing it might be Karen following through on her threats of legal action. Mrs. Walker, a sharp professional voice said, this is Scott Thompson from Thompson & Partners. I'm calling regarding your late husband's will. A small flicker of hope sparked within me. His will? I didn't know Mike had one. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Thompson continued. Mr. Walker came to see us about 5 months ago. He asked that we contact you in the event of his passing. I immediately scheduled an appointment for the next day, my mind reeling. Why hadn't Mike told me about this? What could it all mean? The next morning, I wheeled Dad into Mr. Thompson's office. The lawyer greeted us warmly, his eyes crinkling in the corners with kindness. Mrs. Walker, Mr. David, thank you for coming in, he said, as he gestured for us to sit. I'm so sorry for your loss. He opened a file on his desk. As I mentioned on the phone, your husband came to us to have his will drafted. He was very clear about his wishes. I held my breath as Mr. Thompson began reading. I, Mike Walker, being of sound mind, do hereby leave all my worldly possessions to my beloved wife, Sarah Walker. My breath caught in my throat, and Dad's hand gripped mine tighter. Mr. Thompson continued, this includes our home, my truck, and all our savings. It is my wish that Sarah use these resources to care for herself and her father, John David, whom I have come to love as my own. Tears welled up in my eyes. Even in death, Mike was making sure we were taken care of. There's more, Mr. Thompson added gently. Mr. Walker left a letter for you. He handed me an envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it and began to read. My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you and John. Please know that you two are the best thing that ever happened to me. I made this will because I know how my mother and sister can be. I didn't want to worry you, but I needed to make sure you and John were protected if anything happened to me. You're my real family, Sarah, you and John, not them. Take care of each other, live your lives to the fullest, and know that I'll always be watching over you. All my love, Mike. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad was crying too, his rough hand patting my arm comfortingly. Mrs. Walker, Mr. Thompson said softly, giving us a moment to compose ourselves. There's one more thing. Your husband's truck was insured. Given the circumstances of the accident, the insurance company will be paying out the full value of the policy. I sniffled and looked up. What does that mean? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Mr. Thompson smiled faintly and said, It means you'll be receiving a large sum of money, enough to pay off your mortgage and more. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt an unexpected relief wash over me. The weight that had been pressing down on my shoulders was gone. Mike had made sure we would be okay. We were going to be fine. But as we pulled into the driveway, I saw a familiar car parked on the street. My stomach dropped when I recognized Karen's sleek sedan. "Oh no," I muttered. "What now?" Sure enough, Karen and Ashley were waiting on our front porch. This time, however, I wasn't afraid. I had Mike's letter in my pocket, and his love gave me the strength I needed. "Sarah," Karen began, her voice sweet but laced with something else, "we need to talk about Mike's estate." I stood tall, meeting her gaze head-on. "No, Karen, we don't. Mike left everything to me. It's all legal and official. Want to know why? Because we were his real family, not you. Now please leave. You're trespassing on my property." For once, Karen was speechless. Ashley tugged at her arm, whispering something in her ear. With one last venomous glare, they turned and walked away, getting in their car and driving off. The weeks that followed our meeting with the lawyer were a whirlwind. I threw myself into organizing Mike's affairs, grateful for the distraction from my grief. The insurance payout came through, just as Mr. Thompson had said, and it was more than enough to pay off our mortgage, with plenty left over. One afternoon, while sorting through Mike's desk, I found a small notebook. Curiosity piqued, I opened it and found pages filled with his messy handwriting. It was like a journal, filled with his thoughts and plans for our future. One entry caught my eye. "Thinking about starting a college fund for our future kids. Want to make sure they have the best start in life." My heart twisted. We had talked about having children one day, but we had planned to wait until we were more financially stable. Now, reading Mike's private hopes, I felt a new wave of grief. "Oh, Mike," I whispered, clutching the notebook to my chest. "We had so many plans." That night, sleep eluded me. My mind kept drifting to the journal and the future we would never have. When I finally did fall asleep, I dreamed of Mike. He was smiling, his hand outstretched toward me. "It's okay, Sarah," he said in the dream. "Everything's going to be all right." I woke up the next morning feeling different. I couldn't pinpoint exactly why, but something had changed. As I got ready for work, a sudden wave of nausea hit me, and I barely made it to the bathroom in time. The sickness didn't go away in the days that followed. At first, I thought it was just stress and grief, but a small voice in the back of my mind suggested something else. After a week of feeling off, I found myself standing in a pharmacy aisle, holding pregnancy tests with trembling hands. I bought one and hurried home. The 5 minutes I waited for the result felt like the longest of my life. When I finally looked at the test, 2 clear blue lines stared back at me. I sank to the bathroom floor, overwhelmed by a confusing mix of emotions, joy, fear, grief, and hope all mingling together. "Julie?" Dad's voice came through the door. "Everything okay in there?" I opened the door, tears streaming down my face. His expression shifted from concern to alarm. "What's wrong, sweetie?" he asked, rushing to my side. I held up the test, my hand trembling. "I'm pregnant, Dad." I collapsed into his arms, sobbing. He held me tight, stroking my hair, just like he used to when I was little. "It's okay," he murmured softly. "It's going to be okay. You're not alone, Sarah. And this baby is a gift, a piece of Mike that will live on." His words sank deep into my heart. This child was a piece of Mike, a living reminder of our love. The fear began to fade, replaced by a newfound determination. "You're right," I said, wiping my eyes. "This baby is a gift, and we're going to be okay." Dad smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's my girl. Now, let's get you something to eat. You're eating for 2 now, after all." As we walked to the kitchen, I felt a sense of hope stirring within me. The road ahead would be tough, but with my father by my side and Mike's child growing inside me, I knew we could face whatever came our way. As my belly began to grow, so did my strength. Dad was my rock, always there with a kind word or a helping hand. Together, we settled into a new routine, eagerly anticipating the arrival of the newest member of our little family. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to the garden Dad and I had lovingly planted together, I heard a car pull up. My heart sank when I recognized Karen's sedan. What could they possibly want now? I walked toward the front of the house, one hand instinctively resting on my swollen belly. Karen and Ashley stood on the porch, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable and almost desperate. "Sarah," Karen began, her voice lacking its usual edge, "we need to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow, saying nothing, waiting for her to continue. Olivia spoke up, her eyes darting around nervously. "We've hit some hard times," she said, her voice shaky. "We were wondering if we could stay in your father's old apartment just until we get back on our feet." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything they had done to us, they had the audacity to ask for more. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice firm but calm. "That's not possible. I don't want to have any further communication with you." Karen's eyes narrowed as she took in my pregnant belly. Her face twisted with a mixture of shock and disgust. "You're pregnant?" she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "Already? You little prostitute? I can't believe you've already moved on. Mike's body isn't even cold in the ground." A surge of anger rose within me, but I kept it in check. I didn't feel the need to explain that it was Mike's child. I didn't want my baby to have such a grandmother or aunt. Instead, I gave a small, secretive smile, one that seemed to unsettle Karen even more. "My personal life is none of your concern," I said calmly, keeping my composure. "Now I think it's time for you to leave." Karen looked like she wanted to say more, but something in my expression must have stopped her. With a huff, she turned on her heel, grabbing Ashley's arm as she did. I watched as they got in the car and drove away, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. I had stood my ground, protected my family, and preserved my dignity. Mike would have been proud.